let's talk about Bill. Let's talk about Bill.
Bill, who are we talking about?
Bill Hicks, right?
That's right.
You know, it's one of those things
because
that
I believe it's either infamous or famous or legendary. It's one of those words. You pick one.
Yeah.
Where you and Bill sitting down at the studio just talking about, because it's not him doing a stand-up, it's you guys hanging out chatting.
Yep. It's really
what year is that? What year?
94.
Okay.
Like months later, he was dead.
Right.
Yeah.
He was already a budding comic and was starting to gain momentum right before he passed. Yeah.
Yep. That was the last video interview he ever did.
I knew that.
Yeah, man. It's odd how many folks that I've interacted with that I didn't know who they were to the degree of who they were. Bill is one. So he would be at the studio a lot with Kevin Booth, my buddy Kevin Booth, and they were doing like, you know, Ninja Bachelor Party or any number of little clips that they worked on at Access. So while I was there doing Capsize, Bill and Kevin were there editing, and we'd meet out at the picnic table and discuss the Bible or something and hang out.
The way that's got to be code for play tiddlywinks.
So, you know, I knew Bill was into comedy. I knew he did stand up, but I wasn't sure to what degree or whatever, you know. And Kevin said, "Hey, Bill wanted to come on the show this week. Do you have a slot?" And I'm like, "Sure." You know, what is he going to do? You know, he's like, "Well, he wants to talk about the Waco thing," and I'm like, and he's got a gig at the Cap City, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, of course." So he gets there that night and walks in and says, "Hey, what's going on? Who's doing the interview?" And I'm like, "Oh, interview? Yeah, I thought you might have just like been doing some stand-up or something. So what do we talk about?"
Oh,
and
shit.
he's like, "Well, we can talk about, of course, the Waco thing. We can talk about being thrown off Letterman a few weeks ago." And I was like, "Yeah, right." And he's like, No, yeah, I was on Letterman and they censored my spot." And I was like, "Whoa, yeah." And then he was like, I guess we could talk about the HBO special I have in Europe." And I was like, "Yeah, right." And he's like, "No, yeah." And I was like,
"So you didn't realize that he was like this bad motherfucker because he didn't come off that way, because he's just
I wasn't like,
he's a knucklehead."
Bill Hicks fan.
Well, you figured it out that he was just a knucklehead from Houston, and then all of a sudden he's not a knucklehead from Houston anymore. But he is still a knucklehead from Houston.
Aren't we all like a knucklehead from wherever, man?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So, you know, we went out there and chatted, and I'd say if you watch that, the first half of it, you'll notice there's like just me and him talking, and just he talks about the things he wants to talk about, but we're just chatting, you know. And about halfway through, I look back, and the band that was supposed to be next on the show is waiting in the wings, and I'm like, "Well, I appreciate you coming, man, and you know, we're going to move on." And he looks at the phone, he looks at me, and he said, "Man, I'd really like to take those calls." And I'm like, I look at the band, they're like, go ahead. And I'm like, "All right, you're live." And then the last half of the show is him. That was one of the only, if not the only, performer we've had on taking live calls that did not get one bad call. Everybody was like, Bill Hicks.
Oh,
like,
shit. Wow.
You know,
okay.
People obviously knew who he was, because by the time they got on the air, they were like, oh my God. And so that's how that went down.
Wow.
And you said that was his last videotaped interview?
Yep. He drove out to Florida to do some shows. I think he did a radio interview, and then he drove home to his parents and passed away.
Wow.
Heavy.
Wow.
So
hey,
heavy.
Did you ever go to film a band or tape a band and get there and find an opening act that just blew you away?
Oh, man, almost every night of the week when I was doing the back room shoots. You know, that was one of my things, man. I would go, and usually I would gravitate to shoot shows where I knew one band was good, and there were 3 other bands playing that I could tape, and I'd go tape probably a bigger chunk of the band I knew, but at least 15 minutes from the bands I had never heard of. And man, there's so many bands that I became aware of that way. And Napoleon Machine Gun was one. They were on one of those Pariah shows. I heard they did a reunion show recently. It's crazy.
Yeah, San Antonio band.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Tons
Who else comes to mind?
As far as bands that I really became a follower of, I think I got into Near Dark that way. I had caught them at the Black Cat Lounge, and man, they became one of my favorites. You know, oh God, what was it? It was Quentin's band, Pony Trap. I didn't even know it was Quentin's band, and I stumbled onto that. So there's kind of a duality there with those guys.
Yeah.
There's always somebody out there that just you never know, and they blow you away. I mean, there's a band I saw recently at ABGB, and I had gone to shoot someone else. They're called, well, I say recently, it's probably been about 5 years now, but a whole other musical thing than what we've been talking about, but a band called Pelvis Wrestling. They're blow me away, man. Really eclectic, and now they're like on KUTX and playing all the cool places and doing well.
Wow.
But yeah, there's always one, man. You know, a funny story is when Raw Time was on, they'd send people through to do interviews and whatnot. And I guess the band Blur had become pretty big in Europe, and their first tour over in America to try to play it big, you know, to get big, they were playing all the small venues and stuff. And they sent Blur over to do Raw Time to do an interview. And it's probably 91, maybe 92. I remember it was in the little studio, so it had to be pretty early on. And they came in, and we had the video, and I set up the chairs, and all of them came in, and we had the little lavalier mics back then, and had them in, and I had the bio, and I was like, all right, let's do this thing. And, you know, albeit I was asking bio questions, which who likes that? It sucks. I get it.
Yeah.
But they were giving 1-word answers. You know, I was like, so you came to the United States from Europe, you had this great following, and now you're looking to blossom in the United States. What do you think of the towns here? Great. I was like, oh, about 3 of those out. And I was like, all right, well, here's the video from Blur. We're going to cut to that, and we'll be back. And I cut to that, and I said, see ya, go, bye, bye-bye. And Tim take off.
Did you kick them out of the studio?
Kicked them out of the studio.
They didn't want to be
We're just
there.
a Blur.
They didn't want to be there.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. But
Yeah.
Who's been the opposite? Who did you have in the studio that you maybe were aware of, and maybe you were even somewhat of a fan, but once you sat down and got talking, they just really blew you away with either their intellect or their sense of humor or their knowledge of music or whatever?
one of the first one that comes to mind wasn't in the studio, and I've yet to put my hand on the tape, but I think I might have it in a box that I just went and retrieved from John Moore, who's been helping me with storage. He's producing a documentary on Access that's yet to been released. So when that comes out, it's going to be amazing. It's called When We Were Live. So
Cool.
He's been doing a bunch of my footage, and I went and got some boxes. At the Austin Chronicle Awards one year, I caught up with Lloyd Maines and got to sit down unexpectedly. We just picked a room and started chatting. And I knew so much because I'm a big Lubbock fan, like Lloyd Maines, Terry Allen, Joe Wheatley, Butch Hancock, Jimmy Dale. That's speaking my language. So
Yeah.
I just went on and on and on with him, and we just chatted. And he was so great to hear stories about, folks, Jesse Taylor, and just all the stuff I admired. And at the end of the interview, he was like, "Where are your notes, man?" And I'm like, "Those notes, man. I'm just a fan, And he was very impressed. I was very impressed. So that's the first one that comes to mind. There's a lot of people that impress me in many ways. Van Wilkes has played in the studio a few times. He's a legend, man. He goes back to Fools in the 70s.
He's badass. Me and him have had this super long, well, since the 80s, respect for one another. Like
Yeah.
anytime I see Van, it's just like, "Oh man, you're the king." "No, man, you're the daddy-o." "No, you're the king, bro." So yeah, that's really cool that you have that relationship with a lot of that. I don't want to call it old Austin, but Lloyd Maines you can't really get a bigger name as far as legacy and legend.
Yeah, totally, man. He's got nothing but talent. I love that
Yeah.
guy. I was really stoked when it happened. I think we captured a really good moment when Nathan interviewed Godzilla Motor Company. I thought that was cool. Y'all debuted Wreck, I think, on the show. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. I think that you're right. Who did the sit down? Me and Bobby, or was it
You and Bobby and
Ben?
Nathan did the interview.
Chris?
It seems like, was Chris there for one break? It seems like
Chris might have been there too.
Yeah, we definitely didn't have your drummer.
Yeah. Which one?
I think Keith was in it at the hot minute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No stories about Keith.
No, can't go there. But